Good evening. My name is Sister Kathy Duffy, and in the name of the Board of the American Teilhard Association, I have the great pleasure to welcome you to this evening's event. As I look around, there are so many familiar faces and names. It's very exciting to be here together. I think many more will be coming in too. We're expecting a big crowd this evening. The American Teilhard Association was founded in 1967. Our mission is to share and to explore the insights and cosmic vision of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, S.J., through scholarship, artistic expression, and educational program. We particularly want to show how the vision of Teilhard can help to strengthen the spiritual, theological, social, political, and environmental health of our world. We do this by gathering in groups such as this, by publishing, by sharing in retreats and in other kinds of gatherings.
And then Michael Hughes.
So as you came into the event, you saw some of the events that we have planned for you. And so we'll talk about that at the end. This evening, we are thrilled to hear from two of our distinguished board members who will share their adventures while making a very important film, Teilhard, Visionary Scientist, a film we have been hoping for many years now. Our speakers, Frank and Mary Frost, are independent documentary filmmakers with more than 35 years of experience. Frank earned his PhD in cinema from the University of Southern California. Mary is a journalism graduate of the University of Toledo and was a syndicated reporter on Capitol Hill before joining Frank Frost Productions. Over the last few years, the Frost have produced a 2-hour film for public television, a story of the life of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Their film relies heavily on Teilhard's own words and those of his correspondence, as found in Teilhard's prolific writings. Interviews with noted Teilhard scholars provide context and interpretation. Filming at major locations where Teilhard lived and worked brought Marianne and Frank to visit France, England, and China. Now, once the film appears, which we hope will be very soon, it will be the first ever television documentary about Teilhard for American TV. Frank and Mary, we are very anxious to hear about your adventures. So please welcome Frank and Mary Frost.
Good evening. I'm Mary.
Hi, Frank.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to the American Teilhard Association for inviting us here tonight. We're very happy to be here, and we welcome all of you out there who are joining us tonight. Many of you have supported us for all the years of this long journey. And the large number of attendees, I think, shows that interest in Teilhard is growing again. So we hope that you will watch Teilhard Visionary Scientist when it airs.
It's a good story, we think. And sometimes, it's true in our case, the story of the film is matched by a story of making of the film. That's a whole other story. And we're here tonight to share that with you and perhaps to tease you to watch the film itself in case, although I think your presence here probably answers your interest in that. So the approach that Mary and I are taking to this is we're considering this kind of a family gathering. This is a Teilhard family gathered, and we, as members of that family, have gone on a road trip. And now we're come back and we're going to show you our photos. This is kind of a show and tell of the photos of places we've been. in the course of making this film.
And I have to mention that we are not Zoom masters, so please have patience with us as we cycle back and forth between screen share.
So we're going to start with a screen share, I hope. And I'm going to take this to the top because it's didn't start at the beginning as it was supposed to. So you see that the title of the film is Teilhard, Visionary Scientist. It's the third title. Some of you may have known the first title, Teilhard, the
evolution.
The evolution of
Teilhard.
Teilhard de Chardin. But well, I won't go into the reason why we changed the title to this, but this is what it is now. And what we're here to talk about tonight are the minor miracles of making of Teilhard visionary scientist. Because along the way, there were many obstacles, took a long time, and every now and then we need a miracle to keep going. And I think we're going to tell you a few of those tonight. Not all of them are miracles, some of them are little things, but this is where we are for now. So let me start with the numbers. This is the first, as Kathy mentioned, the first film on American television of Teilhard ever. So second, it's the second ever show ever made in English. The only previous one was in 1966 by the BBC. We went making of this country show to 4 countries, 3 continents. Kathy forgot to mention we went to the USA as well as France and China. 25 locations, 7 research site trips, and a matching number of shooting trips to those sites. 30 interviews or more, 2 years of editing. It took 300 plus donors, and many of you are among those donors. Thank you. And it took 13 years to complete. We didn't think it would take that long. And now Maryland Public Broadcasting will premiere the show in mid-May. The exact date we don't know because they don't finalize their schedule until 2 months beforehand. So we'll know April 1st what the schedule is for May. And then immediately after the broadcast date, they release it to streaming on the free PBS app. So it becomes available nationally. So there aren't any of you in the United States, at least, who cannot see it immediately after on the free PBS app.
So we designed the show for a general audience, not just a Catholic audience, but for people also who from other religions, people who are non-believers, non-religious. And it's a PBS demographic of educated, curious folks. And the thumbnail description we came up with was that Teilhard is an early 20th century French Jesuit priest and scientist in relentless pursuit of the everlasting on earth, who encounters fame, love, and implacable opposition from his church. Despite exile and lifelong censorship, his transformational insights into science and faith leave a prophetic legacy for our technological age.
So why did we make this film? We keep getting that question. So I won't say this till the end. You don't need to ask that question then, because we'll answer it now. We made the film for 2 sets of reasons. One was Teilhard's importance, and the other was favorable circumstances.
So regarding Teilhard's importance, our hope and goal is that this documentary, plus the educational outreach that we're going to do, will reopen discussion and ramp it up of his hopeful vision for the future. His story is especially important today, we think, because the noosphere that he theorized 100 years ago is manifest in instant global communication and rapidly emerging technology and continuing evolution of consciousness. So continuing evolution towards a kingdom of justice, peace, and love is up to us to choose.
Okay, so in addition to the meaningfulness of Teilhard's vision, quite practical reasons or circumstances made this an attractive project for us. First of all, we were already aware that Teilhard's popular with a certain Catholic and Protestant population, including you all. we also realized that his story, his struggle can make great television. And very practically, the largest collection of Teilhard resources in the US are housed in Georgetown University libraries, which are just a few miles from where we live. And we've had previous experience with PBS, and so we know our way around that. And we expected that we could pull it off in a couple of years of work. Well, you know what happened to that.
Here we are, 13 years later. Once we began, it did not always seem inevitable that we would succeed. We've headlined this presentation Minor Miracles because several times we were blessed in our long quest with unexpected gifts and blessings that allowed us to continue or reshaped our vision.
Okay, so the first story, the first miracle, if you want, small one, you might say, of how we met and became familiar with the Teilhard family, began with a standard rule in Georgetown Special Collections Library. I went there to, I went there to I needed to copy some letters that I had there that I wanted to use potentially in the show. And so I talked to the director of the museum, of the library, and he said, you need permission from the Teilhard family. And he gave me a contact, Marie Bayonne de la Tour, who is the great niece of Teilhard, but it's also the head of the Teilhard Nephews Association. So I wrote to her and sent her a prospectus of what we intended to do and asked if we could have permission to copy letters and other things that belong to the family or came from the family, and did not hear. We sat in silence for several months as we went about other things and kept wondering if we would hear for that. In the meantime, I went to New York and met my first American Teilhard Association meeting. And I don't know if Tracy Higgins is in this room, in this audience, but if you are, hi, Tracy, because on that ATA meeting, I met Tracy Higgins. And I told her about the project, and she was excited about the possibility. And and we agreed to stay in touch. A few days later, I went back to Washington, and I got a letter from Marie Bayonne de la Tour. And Marie wrote, I have shared your prospectus with my cousins, with the family, and we have agreed that we will cooperate with your project. But we have one condition. We want you to agree to work with a friend of ours in the US named Tracy Higgins. So we were home free. And then and I just want to point out that an important factor in the story you're hearing right now was that I was writing to Marie in English and she was writing to me in French. She was not fluent in English and I was not fluent in French. We had translation capabilities and I knew French to read, basically. So we thought we were home free, but this will come up in just a second. So a couple months later, I receive an email from Marie, and she says, we've been thinking about this, and if you really want to understand my uncle, you need to walk in his footsteps. And I'm willing to host you at Auvergne, where he grew up. And so we immediately agreed, and then we waited. We didn't know what the next step was. After a few months, beginning to wonder that we had misunderstood, I wrote back to her and I asked if she, missing some pictures here? Yeah, not yet. When we would be expected to come to Auvergne and where would we stay? And she wrote back saying that she was working on it. She had to get the cooperation of her relatives, but we would be staying at Mirol. Oh, well, that was good. So we went to Google Maps and we found Mirol on the map. And it's a nice little village nestled not far from Clermont-Ferrand, which is the capital of Auvergne. And we noticed on Google that there were 2 hotels there. So we had to make a decision about which hotel we should book a room in. So I wrote to Marie and said, we found Mirole and we're seeing that there's 2 hotels, and which one do you think we should choose? And she wrote back rather quickly in a tone that even in my imperfect French sounded a little agitated. And we didn't know why. And as part of the letter, she said, I don't understand why you are not grateful for the hospitality we are offering you. So our rescue was to call Tracy Higgins. Say, Tracy, can you call Marie and find out what we did wrong? What we did not mean to insult her in any way, but here's what the letter says. So the next day, Tracy called back and she said, oh, Marie explains that you're not going to stay in the town of Mirole. You're going to stay in the home of Mirole, which the family owns. We did not know there was another family residence, and we didn't know it was named Mirole. So it was an innocent mistake, but we also didn't understand that Marie had to go to the owners of each of those homes and get permission for us to be able to go there and see those homes. So we worked that out. We're now ready to show a little video.
But yeah.
So I'm going to stop screen share here and show you a video.
So that was the first place that we stopped when we got to Clermont-Ferrand. It was the family grave at the cemetery in the town. And we wanted to show that to you because we had been to Hyde Park to Teilhard's grave several times already. And we found it very, very poignant and had such a sense of loss that the whole family is buried there and he is buried in a different country. And so it struck us at the time.
So I'm going to do another slide share here.
Yeah.
So this is a still of that, and the whole family history is listed in this, back into the 1800s on that, on those stones. So the next stop after the cemetery was Marie took us to a park across from the home where the Teilhard family wintered in Clermont-Ferrand. And in that park, the city has erected a monument, a statue of Jacob wrestling the angel, also called Wrestling with God. And on the pedestal of this statue are the words spirit and matter. That's more Mirole. When we got to Mirole, we are greatly received, had great hospitality from Régis Teilhard de Chardin, the nephew of Teilhard, who was the owner of that house. Marie that took us down to the River Allier, which ran by the estate, and there's Tracy standing with her. And Marie took us down there to show us the stones, that the place where Teilhard would collect stones as a youth. And you see she has a geologist hammer there because she has to break open the stones. And she showed us a couple of the stones that Teilhard might well have picked up and labeled. And another thing we found at Mirrol was an old rusting plow, and on that plow was a plow hitch, and that's relevant because a very significant story that Teilhard tells in his autobiography about how he had kind of a mystical experience as a youth, and he turned to the most solid things he could find for security, and he called them his iron gods. And one of those was probably this very iron plow hitch. He also had major keys. The keys to the houses in the Teilhard family are this size. When we left Mirrol, we went to Les Moulins. Les Moulins is another house that the family owns, and this one is owned by Marie's father, was owned by Marie's father, Henri de Passage. And he welcomed us to the house, showed us the room that Teilhard would stay in when he came there in the late 40s each summer to do his retreat and to have some rest. And from that time on, they've kept that room just the way it was. So that's Teilhard's room as it was then. The house also had a chapel built in, and this is the chapel in which Teilhard would say, I don't have time to tell you the story, I don't think, of Henri's story, at least, of how he served Mass for Teilhard there. Then we went to Sarsenat, which is the house that most of you know as the place where Teilhard was born. When we went back to shoot there after our site visit, the family gathered for their summer vacation there, welcomed us with open arms, and they gave us a free run of the house to shoot. Going up the stairs and down the corridor of the second floor. There at the end, you see a little light of this doorway there, and that doorway in Teilhard's memory and in the heart of matter talks about the seeing his mother's bedroom, and in that bedroom he says, "This is where I was born." And this is just a picture of the crew at work and shooting at Sarsenat. So Sarsenat was near Sarsenat is one of the volcanic mountains that's the whole Auvergne area is made up of volcanic mountains, which they call puys. And the nearest one is Puy du Pariou. And I don't know if any of the others of people who visit Sarsenat have gone to the Puy du Pariou, but we agreed with Marie and Tracy and their friend Marie Joseph to walk up that mountain. That was not quite what we expected. Mary, you tell the story.
Yes, this is probably the hardest day of my life ever. We were so excited at the thought of climbing the mountain because Teilhard had climbed it many times and couldn't be that hard, could it? Well, for one thing, we were not in as good a shape as these three ladies who went walking a lot. And the other thing is we didn't have the right shoes. I only had one pair of shoes with me, and they were street shoes with slick leather soles, like you wear on the street. And I didn't even give it a second thought that I should have had sneakers or hiking boots, anything like that.
I don't think it begins to show how slippery it was there because of the mud.
It had been raining. Yeah, that was the other part. And so eventually, as we were climbing, and I was very slow, I could see that the others needed to walk faster.
Could I qualify that? You didn't walk slow. You walked 2 steps and slipped one back.
Yeah, that's true. And so we said, why don't you go on? Just wait for us at the top. We'll get there. And so there Frank and I were, and it was the path got narrower and narrower, and you see all those roots And as the trees became closer, that was one way I could pull myself up, is going from branch to branch, and Frank kind of pulling me and pushing me, and my thinking, I'm never going to get to the top and I can't go back because won't know where to go. But we kept going, and I kept sliding, and then eventually, hopefully the next slide, we get to the top.
Took us a
Yay!
long time to get there, and they were patient. They were waiting for us.
Yeah, you can see the other mountains. It's a whole chain of mountains there. And this is looking down in the bowl of the volcanic, what do you call that?
Volcanic bowl.
Yeah,
That was classes of school classes go there for whatever lessons and field trips. So that's what was happening down below there that
Yeah.
day.
I did not go down there and come back up. So,
Looking from another angle,
yeah, that's the town of Clermont-Ferrand. And the black thing kind of in the center there, Frank shows it, is the cathedral, which is black. Because it was built from stone that came from the volcanic mountains. We're going to move now to a clip of Auvergne, and that's one of the short clips that are actually from the film that you'll be seeing tonight, and this is the first one.
Auvergne molded me. Auvergne served me both as a museum of natural history and as a wildlife preserve. Okay, this next miracle requires a bit more of a story, which I'll let Mary tell. This is in Hastings, England.
Go back to the PowerPoint. So in 2012, we took a research trip to Hastings, England, because we knew that Teilhard had studied there, did his theology training in Hastings. And we didn't know anybody there. And so, but there were a number of people already in 2012 who knew that we were doing this film. And one of them was a former Jesuit that Frank knew, Matt Cook, who wrote us that one of his former seminary classmates lived in Hastings. So it was kind of a miracle there, and introduced us to him. His name was Ed Eklund. We told Ed we were coming, and could he help us find our way around? And he was going to be out of town on the days that we were going to be there. So he connected us up with a local amateur geologist named Ken Brooks. And Ken was just marvelous. He and his wife Diana were terrific. They arranged our travel situation, found a B&B for us to stay in, and escorted us around town for the days we were there, and took us here to the former theology seminary where Teilhard studied. It is now a housing development. And so it's been replaced by houses, but the city put this plaque up in honor of Teilhard and the fact that he had lived there during that time. And he told us about details about Teilhard's geological research during those years he was there, and invited us to their house to see the fabulous collection of fossils and stones that Ken had gathered over the years. So pay attention to this slide. You can see that there's no water in that slide.
Okay, so the tide is out is a key thing. So I was really interested most in terms of shooting to see that the cliffs where Teilhard had found many fossils. And I had always imagined, not knowing any better, that Teilhard would walk along the coast there next by the cliffs and look for fossils lying out in the open. And that was really a silly idea, because the way you find fossils is to know which of the what do you call them?
Strata.
Strata of the stones are fossiliferous. And when you can find stones like that fallen off. If you find those stones, you can crack them open, as Ken Brooks did for us. And when you crack a stone, if you know what you're looking for, you can often find fossils. In this particular one that he opened, he found little tiny fossils. Teilhard found some really major finds in the course of that. He had found many fossils. And this picture, then by contrast to the other one we showed you, indicates what it's like 3 hours later when the tide comes in.
And you don't want to be on that beach then, so.
So the key piece of information there that Ken really emphasized to us was that you only have about 3 hours at a time that you can possibly shoot. So we needed to find a time when the light would be good, preferably early afternoon, when we could be ready and begin shooting when the tide got far enough out, and then we would have 3 hours to shoot before the tide would come back in. And he emphasized how dangerous it was if we got caught there with the tide coming back in. Now what am I showing?
Now you're stopping the screen share. So we went back home feeling very good that we understood Hastings, and we knew that we had friends and helpers there who could, when we went back with our crew, and we would know what to film. But it took 4 years to raise the money to go back and take advantage of that research. That was kind of, well, that's why it took 13 years. We would raise enough money to do whatever the next step was, and we would do that step, and then we would have to go back to raising more money. When it was time to go back, it was a trip that was going to combine going to Hastings and also going to Paris and Verdun on the same trip. And so we had to coordinate.
It's the only way to do it economically.
Yes, right. We couldn't make multiple trips over there. We had to get everything done. And so, whoops, Frank's disappearing. Sorry about that. Therefore the importance of the tides, and to get tide tables to know. And also the Museum of Natural History in Paris only allowed filming on Tuesdays. And in May, which is when we were hoping to do it, there was only one Tuesday available because of various holidays that had happened. So we're upping the ante of difficulty here. And I went online to look up the tides in Hastings, and they could only get like a month or so at a time. So I got in touch with Ken to say we were coming back, and, could he help me find out about the tides? And I didn't hear back. And so we went back to our friend Ed Eklund and said we were trying to reach Ken. And he said that sadly Ken's wife Diana had died in the 4-year time period, and that he was quite distraught and would really be unable to help us. So Ed's wife then, Barbara, jumped into form and said she would go down to the harbor and pick up a physical copy of the printed tide tables that were available, and she would mail them to us, which she did. So we have the tide tables. We could figure out what days in the daytime were low tide, and try to hook that up with the museum in Paris. But we still didn't really have anybody to help us with local arrangements. And literally out of the blue, we got an email from a woman named Georgina Clare, who said, I just heard about your project, and I want you to know that Teilhard pretty much changed my life, I think is the way she referred to it. And if there's anything I can do to be of help, I would love to do it. I used to work in television.
She lived in England.
Right, she lived in England and in broadcasting. And we said, well, we're going to be in Hastings, And she said, oh, I live 40 minutes away. Whoa. So she became our fixer there, and she connected us with Peter Austin and his wife, who were also amateur geologists like Ken was, and Georgina's husband was also a geologist. So she made all the arrangements, and we just had a wonderful filming time in Hastings with no rain and lots of low tide. So here comes another video, a video of Hastings.
From Cairo, Teilhard goes to Hastings, England, to continue his dream of becoming. From Cairo, Teilhard goes to Hastings, England, to continue his dream of becoming a priest. French Jesuits had moved their theology school to England after French law banned religious orders from teaching. Teilhard will study there for 4 years. It's another perfect place for him. He immediately begins to explore and writes home,
Naturally, one of my first preoccupations was to see what the countryside had to offer. Geologically speaking, this is a lower Cretaceous area, approximately 120 million years old, marked by chalky soil, the extinction of dinosaurs, the development of early mammals and flowering plants.
on his few days off, when the tide is out, he's able to hunt for fossils at the cliffs nearby, as amateur geologists still do today.
That last scene should show you what the danger is of the tide coming in.
Mhm.
Uh,
So now you're China.
so now we're going to China. Um,
Not, this is no PowerPoint.
okay, so the early on in the process, we just began to decide we were going to do this project, and I probably, like most of you, at some point, maybe even now you feel this way, that Teilhard is basically a visionary, a spiritual visionary. And so I went to Woodstock Library to begin the research, and Leon Hooper, the librarian, said, okay, why don't we start first with the Barber collection? George Barber was a colleague of Teilhard's in China and had left all of his papers and works and many of the things that he'd gotten from Teilhard to the Woodstock Library. So I dig into the Barber collection and find tons of papers that Teilhard had written, along with maps and diagrams and things. And what really hit me in the head was that Teilhard, he may have been a visionary, but he was a down in the dirt scientist. He was very detail oriented, and his specialty was analyzing soil and layers of soil, strata, which is key to dating things that are found in excavations. So we now knew that we had to give much more attention to science in the show than I had originally expected. And we also presumed a little bit that we would be going to China, but now we definitely had to go to China. Luckily, we had already found a consultant who was a Chinese paleontologist who had been referred to us, who speaks English, and so we contacted him in his teaching gig in Canada to make sure that he was going to be in China when we got there. We coordinated our schedules, and we got to China.
So to find a place to kind of help us out, Georgetown has a center in Beijing at a Chinese university called the Beijing Center for college students in the U.S. to go over and learn about Chinese culture and learn Mandarin. And so they welcomed us to come and stay in one of the little apartments that they have available, and were very helpful. We really didn't know what we were going to do when we got there, but we went, and they had given us emailed us the directions to this university in Chinese characters, so we could just hand it to the taxi driver, and taxi driver got us to the right place, and then we had to find the building, which we did. And then it was Saturday night at about 9 o'clock, and the flight was 13 hours from Washington to Beijing. And so we climbed the 5 flights of stairs that we had to go to, and crashed in bed. Because Frank had said we had an appointment with Hailu Yu on Monday morning across town, and we had to take the subway to get there. And Frank said, we have to go tomorrow so we can make sure that we will get there and find our way. So we got up and went to the subway, and even though it was very, very crowded on Sunday, we had to change.
Had to change trains.
Yeah, we had to change trains. Don't you want to get rid of that?
No, and they,
Yeah, and so so we got on the train, and we got to the first change where we had to change trains, and we had stayed near the door so we could get on and off these.
what you forgot to mention was how utterly crowded it was.
Yeah.
It was like rush hour in New York City
Yeah.
on a Sunday, midday, as we were going down, and we knew we had to make at least 2 transfer points.
Right.
And
So we got to the first transfer point, and Frank was ahead of me, and he stepped out, and a crush of people started coming in, and I was too amazed, too nice, I don't know, whatever it was. He's looking at me, and I'm looking at him like, oh my God. And he reached in and grabbed me by the arm and practically pulled it out of my socket and pulled me off the train. And all we could think of was, where would I have ended up, and how would we have ever found each other again?
so you have to understand that the subway system was very efficient, and those doors opened and people plowed in, and the doors closed, and I was about to lose her. So I had to act on that. So but that worked out.
Yeah.
So
Now back to the PowerPoint.
so now I'm going to share again, and so we made it to the office on Monday morning after we'd done our rehearsal run. It was just as crowded, but we made it. And Hailu Yu works at the Institute for Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology, the IVPP, which is a division of the Chinese Academy of Science. And this is Hailu Yu, and he said, before we talk a lot in his office, he said, let's go down the hall. I'd like you to meet my boss. And he introduced us to Gao Jing. And Gao Jing was somebody who knew Teilhard very well, because he had just written this book that you see in the upper right-hand corner of the frame on Shuidonggu. Shuidonggu was a place that Teilhard and Lisson had discovered and done the first excavations, and it's now we'll come to that. They've now turned it into a tourist attraction. Then he took us down the hall to meet Hu Yamei. Hu Yamei is a scholar whose specialty is Shara Asogol, now called Salawusu. Shara Asogol, you may recognize, is the place where the Mass on the World was written. And if you can see back here, you probably can't see it very well, but there's a little, there's a poster of Teilhard on her wall back there, which she picked up in Europe at a conference. So they arranged for us to go to 4 different places that we had not even heard of, like Shuidonggu and Niawan, and then they not only told us to go there, they set up through the government people to meet us and guide us at each of those places. And it was even more than that. They wined and dined us the night before in every case. It was quite an extraordinary thing. So Shuidonggu is a place where, as I say, it been turned into a tourist attraction. The museum has a diorama that has life-size wax figures that illustrate Teilhard and Lisson arriving the night of the by surprise. They found this inn by chance along their way, and this was the time that they arrived. Next day, they look out and they see these cliffs, and they see that there's possible fossils there. And so they go out and they verify that, and they find some workers, and they spend a week digging there. This is so important to the Chinese government, this place, that they rebuilt the original inn as part of the tourist attraction, and featured there is a huge bust of Teilhard. Also in the Niawan Museum, another place they sent us, there's a huge poster of Teilhard right inside the door that's recognizes how important he was to Niawan, a place that he and Lisson had done excavations after they'd gone to Shara Asogol. And in that location, there's overlooking the valley there, there's another huge bust of Teilhard. What this told us, of course, was how terribly important Teilhard is to Chinese science, at least in the paleontological side. He's considered a co-founder of paleontology in China. We did not know that going there. We did not even know about these places. We knew about Shara Asogol because of Mass on the World, but we didn't know how important it was as far as discovering of fossils. So when we got to Shara Asogol, we were escorted, as we were throughout our time in China. This man in the blue outfit is Jerry Martinson, who was a Jesuit priest from Taiwan who spoke very fluent Mandarin.
Well, he's originally from California, but
He's really an American, yeah. But he spent 40 years in Taiwan. He had a television show there and was known as Uncle Jerry. One of the things he did was teach English on Chinese television. And as we would go around, people would notice him, and he'd love to talk to people. We had to keep pulling him away as we needed to keep moving. Behind him is the historian, who's the expert in Shara Asogol, and in his hand, he's holding a book that he wrote, which he gave us a copy of, but I'm afraid that we don't read it much because it's in Chinese. And then we went to the other place, which was much better known, is Shukudien, where Peking Man was discovered, and Teilhard was in charge of excavations for a period, early period, in this location, and was also became famous because he traveled the world lecturing on Peking Man. If you don't know about Peking Man, that's something you need to learn about. And one of the people in his life was an American woman sculptor who came to China, met Teilhard, stayed there, and was commissioned to sculpt the likeness of Peking Man.
then you go to the video.
We need a video. I'm going to stop this screen share and go to another video clip for you. I need to screen share before I do that.
Their trip is alternately monotonous, demanding, and beautiful. Teilhard has plenty of time to reflect along the way and writes frequent letters. They have been on the road for 6 weeks, with at least 2 weeks still to travel, when they unexpectedly come upon a solitary building offering shelter to travelers on this distant and lonely road. They're pleased to have a place to rest that is not a tent or the open air.
I am writing to you from a marvelous place, an inn at a river bend beside the Great Wall.
This marvelous place is called Sri Donggu, where today a museum immortalizes their arrival with life-size wax figures. Before settling in, Teilhard and Lisant take a moonlight stroll. At nearby cliffs, they are astounded to find pale mammal fossils exposed on the bare cliffs. And with the help of local workers, they spend more than a week digging with unanticipated success. These first fruits of the Lisant-Teilhard expedition become historic. In addition to the mammalian fossils they excavate, wild donkey, horse, oxen, rhinoceros, hyena, among others, they discover Paleolithic remains. The stone tools they uncover offer firm evidence that prehistoric humans had lived in China. Their discoveries effectively launched paleontology in China, and Teilhard and Lisant are considered its co-founders.
And the new PowerPoint.
We got a new PowerPoint, okay?
There we go.
Okay, so the fossils that were found in that they found in China became are directly connected in our story to the Museum of Natural History in Paris, and so we had gone there. We knew that, and we had gone there and visited, and this is one of those little things. We got to the door of the museum, didn't realize that we were going to have to buy a ticket to get in. It was 15 euros. We couldn't afford 2 tickets. So Mary decided to wait outside and I went in to do the research. And right inside the door there at that time, there was this magnificent figure of the musculature of a man. And since that man was so important to Teilhard, we knew that was going to be a good visual to be shooting. I looked around trying to think what visuals would fit our story in the museum there, and I didn't begin to know that where I might find something about Teilhard. So, but I went to the mezzanine and I took another picture of the whole thing, and I knew it was a beautiful place to shoot, even if I didn't know where the Teilhard material was. So when I came out, there was Mary patiently waiting, reading her iPad. And is that it?
So then, as it turned out, when we finished that trip down to Clermont-Ferrand, we came back to the States, and Tracy Higgins stayed in Paris, and Marie introduced her to a man at the museum, Marc Godineau, who was a researcher there and knew all kinds of things about Teilhard. Just end the screen share. And so she told us about Marc and said, "Oh, you'll have to go back and film there," which we did. He showed us, and we're going to show you a very short video of that, these fabulous finds that Teilhard sent back to the museum and to his to Marcelin Boule, who was his mentor there.
Were you ready for that?
Yeah.
I arrived Saturday and went to the museum this morning. I began to work in the library, where I will be spending a good deal of time.
Boule adopts Teilhard as his protege, turning over his large unsorted collection of mammalian fossils collected in the Quercy region of France for Teilhard to analyze and catalog.
Here in the museum, we have quite an amount of material, of fossil specimens, which were studied by Teilhard. So, for example, here I have small jaws, carnivorous mammals.
This will become the basis of Teilhard's master's thesis and doctoral dissertation. In coming years, Boule's trust in his protege will be repaid by his receiving large shipments of fossils excavated by Teilhard in China. Their excavations yield spectacular results that are still on display today, visible in the Museum of Natural History in Paris, a complete woolly rhinoceros, a full skeleton of a horse, and large numbers of individual bones and fossils.
It's a second skeleton, which is an original, which is coming from China and from the fieldwork of Teilhard and Lisson in the locality which is called Schara Osogol.
We kept discovering things as we went along. When we didn't originally know Godineau, Tracy Higgins located him, and we contacted him, and he agreed to guide us in the museum, but he didn't tell us what we were going to be shooting. There's a whole other story about tremendous problems Mary had doing the logistics of getting permission to shoot in the museum. But we got into the museum, and we thought we might find a fossil here or a fossil there that might be attributed to Teilhard. We had no idea that several of the most prominent displays in the museum today are still the displays of the fossils that Teilhard and Lisson provided. Should show a little video of that. We just did that.
We just did that.
And that, my friends, is about the time we have to be telling you stories.
We hope that we intrigued you enough that you want to watch the program, either when it's broadcast in May or streaming on the PBS app. And, you know, if you want to ask any questions, we're happy to answer what we can.
May I ask a question? This is Bill Hocking. Could you say a little bit about Teilhard's experience as an ambulance driver during World War I? And connected with that is, I thought he created the Mass on the World when during the World War I experience. But I think you said it came from China.
Well, it's a very excellent question. Two parts of that. He wasn't exactly an ambulance driver. He was a stretcher bearer, but he was he did rescue wounded people and corpses from the field, and he was very heavily involved in some of the worst battles of World War I on the French side. He was at Verdun for a very long period, for example, and that's another very interesting story, and we don't have time to tell that right now. But he was deeply involved. One of the interesting things, though, that he was so deeply involved in with the men. He could have been serving as a chaplain with the rank of an officer's rank, but he chose he wanted to work with the rank and file, so he took the non-combatant role of a stretcher bearer, and he was fearless. He got several awards.
But he did write the beginnings of the Mass of the World.
So then the second part of your question, he began Mass. He wrote his first version of Mass on the World in there. And then he kept rewriting that over time. And then when he was in China, he kind of wrote the final polished version.
Okay.
Signed in 1923, Shara Osogol, and so it became popularly known as something that was written in China, but it actually, as you said, had its origins during the war.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, but what we would like to do, I'm sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. We would like, instead of, people just calling out questions, if you would write your question in the chat, that would be really helpful. And then I'd like to introduce Andrew Del Rossi, who will read those questions and offer them to Frank and Mary. All right, so please do that as soon as you can. And I guess another option would be to raise your hand. There's a raise your hand feature that might help. I think raising your hand wouldn't help because there's so many of you, so the best thing is either to use the raise your hand feature or get into the chat.
If people want to go ahead, thank you, Sister Kathy. If people want to go ahead and raise their hand,
Yes.
it's helpful. Otherwise, redundancy doesn't hurt. So you can drop your question in the chat and I'll be sure to see it there as well.
Right. So let's do it that way. It'll be easier because there's so many of us. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
I want to
Sure.
apologize to the Sam and Paula Barnaccio because we did click the share sound when we did our video, and I'm sorry that it didn't come through.
All right. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, I will look for that. But otherwise, we have a question from, and I think this is something everyone wants to know, is how will your film be accessed from places outside of the USA?
Outside of the US.
What about outside?
How can people outside of the US access the film?
Access the film. So I think we need to arrange something with ATA. We'll talk about that another time, but in many countries, they can access the PBS app.
Great.
Unfortunately, we've done an experiment already with Australia, and Australia does not allow that. Does not allow the accessing of the app. We don't know how many countries do and how many countries don't. We can also make an arrangement with ATA to have a Vimeo link that we could find some agreement to share. I think we can make it available internationally without a problem.
Wonderful. And this is not any sort of technical advice, but if you are using a VPN or a virtual private network and you're outside the United States, you can set your location to inside the United States as well.
Okay.
That's
Up
good
to you to
know.
figure out how to do that though. But let's go to Jerry O'Brien, who has his hand up. Jerry, please unmute yourself.
Hi, my question is, how did Frank and Mary first become so interested in Teilhard?
Okay. It's a long story and a short story.
So give them the short story.
The first part of the long story is that I was once a Jesuit and I knew Teilhard from back in the day. The short story is that, as we said in the beginning of this show, there were a lot of practical things that made it possible. And the biggest of one of those was the accessibility of resources. So we had an interest in Teilhard. We knew that we believed that since there had never been a show done on Teilhard and he was so important and popular, that we just had to try to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a bunch of questions pouring in here. I'm just trying to keep up with them the best I can. Therese Birch from our Facebook group, who's a very prominent poster and member there, writes, how did Teilhard and his family manage during the German occupation of France in World War II?
I don't think we have any idea about that.
And Teilhard would have been in the United States.
No, he was in China during.
Oh, you're right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know about the family in France. We only know that Teilhard was in house arrest in China. Yeah.
Question though.
Good question. The Japanese occupied Peking, and they either forced Americans out or arrested them, but the French they were tolerant with, and so he only had to live under house arrest.
Thank you. So Marianne Casanova would like to know which location stands out as being most meaningful to you.
I would say Verdun. That was a very emotional kind of place to be. And we have a little segment of it in the show that, I mean, Teilhard lived through the whole war and was never hurt. In all 67 battles, 2 of his brothers were killed in World War I. And he, he probably had emotional trauma afterwards. It was a very difficult time, but but Verdun was to see the totality of the destruction in the museum there.
This doesn't actually address that question, but for Teilhard himself, the most important place on earth was Paris. And that you need to understand that to understand how difficult it was for him to be forced to live outside, to live in China and then later in the US. And those weren't so important to me as making the film, but I was constantly aware of the fact that all the places that he really wanted to be home in France.
And I've been notified here by Paul and Sam that just earlier in the chat, Paul Hahn actually commented, and he was saying that here in China every year they organize a conference on Teilhard's life and prophetic ideas. Just that out as I work through the chat here.
Okay, we should also say to Paul that we interviewed his name?
Oh, Alex Wong?
Alex Wong, at that time, the head of the Association of Friends of Teilhard in China. And so we cheer you on. We know it's a great thing there in the show. When you see it, if you haven't already seen it, you will see that we also interviewed Madam Wong, who had translated Divine Milieu into Mandarin. So there's a great deal of interest, we know, and we'll be looking forward to working with you on making that possible.
Right, thank you.
And
So I don't know if this came up earlier, you may have brought it up, but Susan McBride is asking, what is the scope of the movie? Does it deal with Teilhard's relationship with the church and his theological ideas?
oh, I love that question. It's again got two parts. The first part is we decided at the beginning, since this is the only show on American television ever, and also the only one in English that was done since the BBC, which was basically a show on his ideas, that we felt we needed to tell as comprehensively as we could his whole life. Secondly, going at it as a biography, leaving the greatest depth of his ideas to be followed up by people and our website will be a portal to do that, and the ATA can be the portal to do that. There's a lot of scholars who can help with the in-depth understanding of his ideas. We provide the context, the human context. We feel that by telling the human story of Teilhard, we can introduce a whole much larger audience to pursue interest in Teilhard.
Thank you.
And Andrew, before you ask another question, I just want to give a shout out to somebody in the audience who's our editor, Bob Canner, who, if we hadn't had Bob Canner, we wouldn't have a show. So he's out there somewhere. Everybody can thank him.
It was a team effort.
Oh, yeah. You always say that. Okay, Andrew.
Sure. Let's see here. So Joan McManus would like to know if you touch on some of Teilhard's personal and spiritual leanings in the film.
Oh, of course we do. The spirit, those are the motivations that drive his life. So if we're telling the drama of his life, we have to touch on those things. Yes, by all means.
Barbara C., are you trying to ask a question?
Yeah, I have been repeatedly.
Sorry, I haven't seen you ask it. Why don't you just go ahead and want to ask Frank?
Twice in the chat, I have actually a couple, 3 questions, and trying to raise my hand here. So the first one was, I was curious as to the Jesuits and their allowance of funding priests' lives that are kind of in the mainstream of, in this case, anthropology. It just didn't quite gel with my familiarity with the Jesuits. I know they're a very scholarly order, but it just seemed like it was more of a mainstream occupation, and yet his lifetime of study was seemingly funded by the Jesuits. So how does that work?
Well, it's true that Jesuits are most known for education and a little bit for pastoral, but it is simply a matter of history. The Jesuits have always been allowed to and encouraged to follow, take the talents they have and to apply those. And so it was not at all unusual for him to be, funded, if you want, to study theology.
Yeah, many Jesuits have studied science, and we interviewed George Coyne, who is a former director of the Vatican Observatory, who's a Jesuit.
Mhm.
So,
And the other question was related to the Teilhard family. They seem to have had quite a lot of wealth. How did they accumulate such wealth? What was their background of acquiring that level of house with a chapel, and on it went?
Well, yes, I suppose you would consider that a great deal of wealth, but remember, Teilhard was born in 1881. This was back in the 19th century, and even in the 18th century when the Teilhard family was beginning. And no, they go back farther than that. Their family had been gentry for years. I don't think they would have considered themselves wealthy, but they were certainly in the upper class. And they ran 3 farms. That's why they had 3 estates, essentially, with this tenant farmers. And so that's how they acquired wealth.
they had land.
They had land,
Mhm.
and they were among the educated elite.
Thank you. Very well done. I really appreciate your. And I guess the last question was, you mentioned the Hyde Park grave you had visited prior. Is that the Hyde Park of Chicago?
No,
No.
that's the Hyde Park where in upstate New York, where the former novitiate is now the Culinary Institute of America.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I see Paul's hand up there. Please, Paul.
Yeah, I guess when we talk about the theological difficulties Teilhard had with the church authorities back then, now with Pope Francis, it seems that he will be totally raised up as a new type of theological symbolism for the church. Frank and Mary also say something about it for the benefits of our understanding in this area.
Okay, so this is a complex a question that has a complex answer that would take a long time to really go into the historical context for it. But you're much too young, Paul, to have lived through the theological reality of the church before Vatican II, when the church was basically had grown into an institution that was very took pride in it. In fact, it was eternal. It did nothing changed. They had the truth, and everything was static. And Teilhard came, but he wasn't alone. There were other French Jesuits and others who were that he related to, who when Teilhard discovered evolution, it was a huge aha for him that we are not static. This all began way back in what we now call the Big Bang. And ever since then, the cosmos has been emerging, and it's still emerging. And once you have that insight, then you do want the church to change to recognize that. And that was a very deep impulse that created great angst in his life, because he was so sure he had a gift for the church, and the church did not want that gift. But shortly after his death, of course, came the Vatican Council, and the French movement that was in tune with Teilhard was very influential in that. And that's why you'll find John Haunt, the theologian, saying in the course of our show that a great deal of influence in the Vatican Council came from Teilhard and his ilk. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Frank. Yeah, the church has a tendency to recognize genius rather late, unfortunately.
Well,
Let's go over to Linda and then again to Therese.
Hi, Frank and Mary, and thanks for your work. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the film. And I'm wondering, in this moment, which really does seem, it seems to me that it's taken this long for Teilhard de Chardin to have his moment culturally, in a wider sense. And I'm wondering if at the end of your film or anywhere during it, you are mentioning, after his death, it is his biography, of course, the influences that he has had, that could give people, your audience, a place to follow up, a place to begin to pursue their own various interests in Teilhard and his life and his ideas. Because even though he may be having a moment, I still think it's pretty closeted off from the mainstream Christian culture. The evolutionary point of view, the kind of an evolutionary mystical point of view. So just wondering if your film gives people a little leg up in terms of following further than just the film itself.
I'm going to guess from your question that you're an American.
I'm an American.
And the American church is particularly averse to change. And we, Mary and I, have throughout this process become more and more sensitized to the fact that liturgically it's very hard to find preaching that is consonant with the vision of Teilhard. But we're hoping, one of the things that we hope to do is to have some impact. We are giving a presentation, for example, to the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests. And we're hoping that this will begin to stimulate thought about changing seminaries to have some of that impact. But we agree with you that that his vision is still with a very small group. That's one of the things that motivated us to do the show, is we want to go to a much wider audience where he's basically unknown, and that those don't have to be Catholics to do that. As a matter of fact, the more Teilhard himself was not evangelical, in the sense, was not somebody who was trying to convert people. He lived his preaching, if you want, but he didn't do that. I love to tell one story that I think indicates something that we tried to do in the film, and that is when he went on an expedition sponsored by Citroën across China, and when he came back at the end of that, it was a New Year's Eve in 1931-32, and 30 of his colleagues, many of them unbelievers, but all loving Teilhard, had gathered, and he invited them all to a sunrise mass on New Year's Day, and they all showed up. And he started off in talking to them. This is recorded by the leader of the expedition, by saying that not for one of you here does the word God mean the same as for any other of you here. And then he went on to say, but we all know that there's something greater than ourselves that we must give ourselves to. And so that was his notion of the inclusivity that he saw was inevitable in the arc of evolution. And I think we have a long way to go, but I still think that's something that we should address. So we wanted to tell a story that would appeal to people far beyond narrow church.
And would lead them to, our website needs a lot of work right now, which it's getting, but lead them back to find places, books, articles, the American Teilhard Association, places and things they can look up and find out about Teilhard's vision and what he believed.
I would say one other little irony here is when we started this project, we're filmmakers and we thought he was a really good story and make really good television. And we thought we'd knock off this documentary. But it took so long to raise the money, and at every step where we had to spend more time raising money, the show got richer and richer. And we discovered we weren't making a show, we were part of a movement. And now we recognize that we're not movement leaders, we're still filmmakers. And so we think we have grown into, whether we intended to or not, we didn't intend to actually, we've grown into a partnership, you might say, with the American Teilhard Association.
Thank you, Frank. That was a wonderful answer. And having seen the film myself, I can attest that it taps something affectual in the viewer. I don't know if that's just because, I've committed at least the last decade of my life to studying Teilhard, but it feels like it's way overdue. I used to teach high school, and as I was sitting there screening the film, I was thinking, wow, I know not every kid in one of my classes would have enjoyed this, but I could see this really striking a chord in a way that, and then this is not to downplay anything, but a traditional film on one of the saints may have, because he lived such a life that was so ahead of its time. Even today is very much ahead of our time. And when you layer that with your artistic skill as filmmakers, the fact that you went on this pilgrimage and you immersed yourself in his life, met his family, went on location, and then you're again adding all these layers of the music and the editing and refining and having this crystallized product, it really just is a testament to the work that you've done, to Teilhard's vision, and it's a well justified. It does it justice, is what I'm saying, and I think that it will stir something, in the hearts that maybe can't be stirred by even some of Teilhard's writing, which is thick, it's heady, and it can at times challenge us to really feel in our hearts what Teilhard felt. And I think that art is a beautiful way of bypassing those like cerebral filters. And you two have a wonderful gift. And I know Bob was so instrumental. I had, the honor to meet him at the New York conference, and just really a tribute to, your skills and the creative spirit that you channeled in this as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the compliment. And people have sometimes even now are complaining because the show is too long. Why did you make such a long story? And when we decided to do a comprehensive biography, we also knew that we didn't want to just recite facts. We wanted to capture the drama of his life. We wanted to
and hear his voice.
and hear his voice. And so we consciously set out to tell it as much as possible in his own words, and to tell it with a dramatic angle, and not just the list of facts. So thank you for the compliment. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, pop your popcorn, pour a glass of wine. It's enjoyable. It really is. It's moving. It takes you on an emotional roller coaster of sorts. Yes. There's just a lot of love pouring in through the chat here too, Frank and Mary. I hope that the two of you have an opportunity to look through some of these messages of appreciation that people are sending.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All.
Yeah, just a lot of gratitude. So before we turn things back over to Sister Kathy and wrap up, I just want to see if anyone else has a hand they'd like to raise. Therese, you had your hand up, then it went down. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, I think you can hear me, right? I mean, first of all, I love this night. I love your approach. I love you. I renewed my membership in the American Teilhard Association, and I love Andrew. Andrew brings a lot to everybody. So I just had to say that. But the two pivotal things, and I think, and I know it's not a story about his theology, but the two things that strike me as being absolutely vital for people to hear from Teilhard is the like his understanding of the incarnation and matter and the lack of binaries is really in opposition to fundamentalism and ideology where God is up in the sky sitting in a chair giving us orders, and that's important for this reason. You're participating in the incarnation and co-creation. Like that's vital. And people very often don't understand that. They almost think it's, like sacrilege. That's one thing. The other thing is I'm a poet, and I was on a poetry thing with Malaysia today, and the East and the West, and Teilhard has such a great contribution to make because he says, no, it's in differentiation that we become one with one another. It's not in suppressing or, I mean, those two things, I think, I don't know if they're at all even mentioned in the film, but they are like critical at this time and have helped me tremendously. So I don't know, maybe if you want to say something about that, but there's like a split really in the way people understand who God is and how God is in this universe, and Teilhard's contribution is like unbelievable.
Yeah, so a course needs to be built around the film because we only have the time to tell the story. We're not to articulate the understanding of it theologically speaking. But there's a lot of room for doing just what you say. One of the things in our first version of the show, it was 3.5 hours. One of the things we had to take out was we had a nice segment on the Scopes trial, the monkey trial in Dayton, Ohio, Tennessee, I mean, which happened the same year and the same month that Teilhard was being suppressed by the Jesuits for over the question of evolution. And things have only gotten worse in this 100 years. And we've become more polarized, and the evangelical rejection of evolution has stayed strong. So we felt strongly that we could contribute to a dialogue about the compatibility of science and faith. But we don't articulate that. All we do is set it up so other people can talk about it. So study guides, lessons for classes for schools. I don't know what the educational tools should be or who's going to do them. But I think those are the next steps, and I really appreciate the question, Therese.
Thank you.
And thank you, Therese, for all the work that you do on Facebook, spreading the good Teilhard word on there.
Absolutely.
Oh, thanks. He drives us, right?
Amen. Amen. I have one more hand that's up here. Beth, Beth, your hand's still up. Let's hear from Beth, and then we're going to go to Sister Kathy for a final word.
Hi, thank you. So I'm sorry I'm not going to put on my video because I have this weird thing happening to my eye, and I feel like a leprous pirate right now. But I'm here. I loved the movie. I've been waiting for it, been talking to people about it. And I'm thinking about how we channel people's newfound discovery through the movie to unify. Like each of us has our own life, our loves, our talents, our skills, our gifts, and we're going to receive Teilhard's thinking through the filter of our lives, and out comes dance or architecture or astrophysics. Is there a way we can prepare the ATA website for this fresh wave of people who are going to be interested? Can we, with PBS tag at the end, go to the ATA website or Frank and Mary's site, and then prepare it so that we can say, are you new here? Did you just watch the film? Let's gather those people while they're, freshly inspired. And I remember, Andrew, one time you said, don't be an idea fairy, just saying, hey, the ATA should do this and not volunteer. I don't know anything about website design, but I'm happy to talk to you or anyone about how we can first, channel people toward those websites so they just don't sit by themselves with this amazement, which, is also useful and they'll think about it, but that we can build the community and see how Teilhard will change the world with each of these new people and all of us together. Thanks.
If I could have one more word before it goes to Kathy, I just want to say that in the course of the broadcast, 5 times in the course of the show, there are what they call web markers will pop up on the screen. Will say, for more information about something, go to the website. And the website it has to go to is our website, because that's what PBS requires. But of course, we'll be collaborating with the ATA, and we hope ATA will. We know that ATA is really the organization that has the reach and the power. But we also want to say, each one of you can help by telling everybody to either tune in if they're in the area of Maryland, Virginia, to watch the show, or to get on the app and watch the show on the PBS app. And the more people who see it, the more chances there are of those things happening, I think.
Well, thank you again, Mary and Frank, for your hard work, for your presentation tonight, and for all that we have to look forward to this spring in terms of viewing the full film itself. We'll stay tuned on exact links and release dates and all that good stuff.
Right.
So can people just go to your website for that? Is that the best place for them to go?
Yes, but we'll be going to you with that same info.
Okay.
We'll give you that.
And your website is the Teilhard Project, right?
Teilhard Project.
teilhardproject.com.
Yeah.
Right, so it's either through teilhardproject.com or teilhard-chardin.org, which is the ATA's website. You can stay tuned for more information.
Right.
And to follow up on Beth's comment, we are in process of actually rehauling the entire website right now. There's already some small changes you can see, but we are certainly doing all we can to make ourselves available as a resource for anyone who's interested on deepening their knowledge of Teilhard.
And we need to coordinate with you about how best we can send people from our website over to your website. So
Definitely, yes, we'll work on that
Yeah.
as soon as you're ready.
Okay.
Be with us. Yeah, this is so exciting. And I was going to say too, one of the things we do already is we have three reading groups. There are 150 people on my list, and Andrew and Sam and Paula have similar reading groups, and this is a way for people to come and learn something new from each other, from the readings that we do. There's so many ways we already try to do that, so it's a matter of taking advantage of it, so that's wonderful. But I do want to thank you, Frank and Mary, for the 13 years. I remember you at the beginning. Frank came to my office to check. It was such a thrill to think that maybe there would be a film someday, and here it is. So we really appreciate it, and it was an amazing feat. Probably more than you ever thought. So, but before we leave, I want to remind you, if you're not a member of the American Teilhard Association and wish to join us, you should go to our the membership page of our website, and you'll see that on the screen. And if you're not on the mailing list of the Institute for Religion and Science at Chestnut Hill College, that would be another thing you might want to join. We have events that we try to publicize with the ATA, and just send me an email and I can put you on that list. And so we would love you to join both. And there are activities, and they keep increasing. We keep finding new ways to come together. And then I would also like to invite you to 2 upcoming events. One is sponsored by the Institute for Religion and Science, and the other by the American Teilhard. On April 2nd at 7 p.m., Max Blackie, a chemist and spiritual director from South Africa, will join us. Her topic is experiencing wonder in intellectual conversation. This is the kind of listening and speaking that we need to learn in the world to counteract the polarization. So I think Max has a lot of wisdom to share with us. So I hope you'll join us. And then on June 1st at noon, John Philip Newell, well-known expert in Celtic spirituality, will join us on Zoom for the American Teilhard Association's annual event. It'll be called Sacred Earth, Sacred Soul. And besides focusing on Celtic spirituality, Philip will examine connections between Teilhard spirituality and his own Celtic spirituality. And as usual, we'll embellish the event with contemplation, music, and art. We really try to encompass all of it as we present, especially on our annual event. And for those who can join us, we're going to try to gather at Teilhard Abbey in Paoli for a day or for the whole weekend. And we'll watch the presentation together, and we'll prepare for it with a discussion, with contemplation, with plenty of food and fun. And so it would be a great in-person event if you're close enough, or if you can, you can manage coming. So it's not, the Daylesford is not far from the airport. And you can go to our website. Oh, and we have some, we have several retreats and several reading circles that you can join. All of this information is on our website. So if you go there, you can find that. And once again, I want to thank you for your attention, for your good questions and comments, and for your continued support of our efforts. I also want to thank Frank and Mary for joining us this evening and for sharing their amazing experience. And I hope to see all of you again at our upcoming events. Thank you, and have a good rest of the evening.